All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Backstage. This is the first and probably only rendition of this in a series. I'm staged, and I'm joined by InsaneChaos, Shap, and Licky. Some of the all-stars from the AD2L casting community, but definitely not the only casters that we've got. I want to just take this time to kind of talk about some of our experiences in casting, some of the problems that, people have brought up before in chat, some of the things that we can do or that make this difficult or interesting. Also just our experiences in amateur casting, semi-pro stuff, or even in different scenes. So we'll go around the room real quick and kind of introduce everybody. I'll start. I'm staged. I got my start in casting way back when I was in college. In my buddy's basement, we were just recasting old StarCraft 2 games, and Wings of Liberty came out. Took a long sabbatical after that. Not even know if I'd call that casting, but I came back in 2020 with AD2L. I was regularly casting Contender with my co-caster Rosnak, and made a pretty okay splash on the scene. And since then, I've done a little bit of semi-pro casting with Sir Action Slacks. I've done observing for yes, Cap and Jenkins for a TSM FTX charity tournament, and I've done some work with community gaming as a host, caster, and observer. Um, I've also done a little bit of Rocket League stuff here and there, but I've kind of retired from that and mostly retired from casting in general. Uh, Chaos, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm insane chaos and I'm an alcoholic. Wait, that's later. Um, I was introduced to AD2L as a mediocre player, and then get eliminated. Nothing else to do. Become a mediocre caster. So I got a lot of time casting games, largely just solo. Um, Either from my Twitch stream or joining some other streamers. Um, so that's been a lot of fun. Every now and then, I get asked to cast or be a panelist for like a grand finals, and it's fun to get involved in that kind of production. That's basically where I come from.
Okay. Uh, Chap, you're one of the newer faces. I'm not even too familiar with you. I've seen one of your casts before. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, my name is Shap. You call me Tyler or either. It's whatever. Yeah, I am fairly new to casting. I got started casting for my college team, and then I enjoyed that, so I looked into casting elsewhere, and I just found the AD2L League, and I started casting there, and I've been having a pretty good time with it.
I gotta say, I think all good casters are named Tyler. My co-caster at the start was also named Tyler. Uh, so I think
There's just a
you're.
lot. I think there's just a lot of Tylers in the world, so you just look everywhere, and you're like, oh yeah, if there's someone good at it, they're probably named Tyler.
All right. So speaking of good people, we've also got LickyTheCow over here. I don't know if your name's Tyler, but tell us a little about yourself.
Definitely not named Tyler, unfortunately, but I am Licky the Cow. I've been casting in AD2L for like 3, 4 years, I think, at this point. A good amount. I've done a little casting all over the place. In a bunch of other leagues. Did a little bit with community gaming. I think when Stage was there as well. Um, yeah, just love doing casting.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that Licky, you were actually the first partner that I had in AD12 for an All-Star game, and
That is correct. I remember that. Yeah.
it was kind of like a rude awakening for me as well because that was the kind of thing where I felt so bad because I stepped on your toes all the time and I felt like I crapped the bed. So it was a
No,
really good experience, but I felt bad personally.
it's totally okay. That was a very, very fun cast to do. And it's a good introduction to the scene, I think.
So that kind of brings me to one that I didn't put on the itinerary, but I wanted to talk about a little is the difference between solo casting and duo casting, and what do you guys think about it? What's your experiences? Easy in between, I I know from a caster's perspective, I prefer duo casting a lot of time, but I'm just curious, from both sides of the equation, as a caster and as a viewer, what do you get?
If I may start, I thought about this a lot going into this thing we're doing, but laning stage is awful when you're solo. There's just too much to cover. Um, you're gonna, I mean, you shouldn't feel bad about missing kills or whatnot. That's just impossible to check. But even then, just being able, there's so much to talk about each single lane that your thoughts are gonna be jumbled. Um,
but I've done a lot of solo casting. I'd say you normally categorize casters into one of two categories. You got your play-by-play and then your like post-fight analysis. Most of the Twitch streamers that are casting will be solo casting if they don't find someone to play with them. And you pretty much always need a play-by-play going on. So they're gonna err on the side of play-by-play. And if you're gonna co-cast with them, you have to expect that you can't step on your toes and try to also do play-by-play. I found that out the hard way. That was also part of why I moved more towards casting from my own channel, because I recognize I just end up talking over other people. I didn't want to do that. I'll still do analysis now and then because I've matured a bit in that regard, been more self-aware about it. But I think that's the biggest thing about solo casting is that because you have to do it all by yourself, you're gonna end up doing the play-by-play. And if you feel like that's too much for you, maybe just look to go co-cast with someone who's already has a stream out like InsaneChaos or something.
Right,
And
right.
you should be good to go with that.
How about you, Shap? I know I think the one stream of yours that I caught was a solo cast, but you said you've done stuff, with your college and everything. What's your experience between like solo and duo and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so when I was first starting out, I was doing duo casting at my college because it was just an entire organization. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, so it was a lot of just us not knowing what we're doing, stepping on each other's feet, and like just not even talking about it, just sort of like not understanding what's happening. As time went on, we got much better about that, about at least talking about it and then knowing what we were doing. But once I moved over to solo casting, I realized how hard that was going to be just on your voice because you're talking for at times 45 to an hour just straight, and
Mhm.
you got to stay high energy all the time. If you're especially if you're doing solo casting, yeah, you almost have to be more high energy to be able to captivate everyone as much. So it's definitely straining and difficult to do for an entire series, but it's nice to not be cut off by someone else as well. So it's sort of like the trade-off of you're either going to be cut off by someone else or you're going to have an easier time going for a longer series. So I think that in the future, because right now I don't really have many people to dual cast with. I don't know enough people because dual casting is something where you really have to know another person to be able to bounce off of them easily. And so I think that once I get to know people a bit better, I'm gonna definitely try and do some like dual casts and definitely try and like do some cooperative work.
What about, and I'm going to kind of toss this over to Licky for like the primary answer and everything, but we've seen kind of the rise of a couple of groups doing like kind of couch casting or group casting. I know that's common with the golf org. It used to be a big rats and bunnies thing. You'll usually get teams who've been eliminated who are really good friends will go back and like cast teams that, or cast games in their same division after they're eliminated. How do you think about that, like just from a professional perspective and also from like a viewer perspective?
I think it offers something that's kind of like cool and different. I think if we're talking professional perspective first, I
Mhm.
think obviously like the thing that's apparent is that like if you're looking for like the highest quality cast that has like all like the perfect things in it, then you're gonna be losing a few of the things depending on like how many people are there. I know like generally golf couch casts have like 4 people at least, and then plus special guests that sometimes arrive. But they also provide this like different insight. Someone was talking about it in feedback discussion, and it was like a thought I had as well when we were talking about like bringing in like tier 2 casters, which is a whole different thing, which I'm sure we're gonna get to. But these players have, or these people are players, and they've been playing in the league for at least seasons upon seasons, and they know the players that they're casting, so they provide this different level of insight um, that is not unlike a pro player that we see in like the DPC league joining the cast. So like
Mhm.
SVG or like Seb or like No Tail or something like that. I think when they join casts, it's actually really, really great, especially when they're paired with a good caster. And we get like similar um levels of familiarity and some cool insight. And it's also just like a chill environment, I think, which is really nice to see.
I kind of
Yeah.
want to dovetail off that real quick because this is something I was going to talk about later, but was actually really interesting. So you talk about like SVG, No Tail, Seb, and everything. I actually kind of want to like put Cap in as a hybrid on that because I don't know if Cap's ever been specifically a pro player, but he's been around all of these pros for a really long time, right?
Are you saying Arkosh isn't a pro team? What is this line there?
So, no,
Arkosh makes the best of content, just saying.
oh, they make great content. You're absolutely right. But I mean, they're gonna get relegated down to tier 2. Like
Oh, absolutely.
that's
God, I
not a
hope
pro team.
so.
That's not a pro team. Like I'm not. I don't have any room to like speak or diss them and everything. I'm just like saying the results speak for themselves. But so I've had the chance to do a little bit of observing for Cap though, and like kind of got to see it behind the scenes when it was Cap and Jenkins, and I thought it was really interesting because Cap is someone, when you listen to his casting, is always talking about his experiences with pro players and like conversations he's had with Fly or with Moon or with all of these NA and EU and SEA pros. But this was a charity event that didn't have any pros. It had really low level players and a couple of really high level players because they were like business folks who were hobbyists of Dota and league pros. So like these are people who don't know Dota very well. And when Jenkins and Cap were casting this, one, Jenkins and Cap is a weird duo. It's just like their dynamic it doesn't make much sense. But two, Cap didn't have any of those personal anecdotes to fall back on. And it kind of felt much more bland than I was used to. And like from a perspective of someone who was like trying to listen to their cast and be entertained while also focusing on the game, it was a little bit lackluster, and I wouldn't say that of someone who I think is literally the A-est of A-tier casters in the scene. So I think that kind of like ties into what Licky was saying about like the familiarity with the players and the teams.
I would think
Yeah.
so. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of casting is sort of just being a part of the community as well, because it's hard to talk about something you don't know about. And when you're just casting a bunch of strangers, it becomes a little bit more difficult to talk about just stuff with that. And a lot of the professional casters just have a lot of time in the field with all of these high level players. So it's easy for them to relate, talk about it, and help viewers understand. Whereas for something like a charity event, they don't really know who's playing, and they don't play in these low MMR pubs. I say low MMR, but it's probably like average, but it's low for them. So it's more difficult to talk about that.
Although I would say that if someone comes in, if someone's casting a community that they're not really a part of yet or they're trying to get into, they kind of offer an external perspective that I don't want to say it's an objective perspective, but it throws away a lot of the bias you might see towards players, especially if they don't know like the metals of players and when they're going into it. They're like, okay, this is a very interesting play that someone's making, and they're just walking uphill and dying or something like that. But I don't know. I feel like that additional perspective that's just stripped of bias, of nuance, of knowing how teams want to operate, and you can kind of see how the game is unfolding, even for people who aren't familiar with AD2L. If they're tuning in for whatever reason, that can be pretty beneficial.
That's a really good point, and it's having that different kind of perspective from like outside of the inner circle, I guess, or like the in jokes.
Mhm.
Because I mean, even if you think about like just AD2L's got a lot of culture and history and everything. You think about like a lot of the players who've been around for a really long time, Gambit, Jamie, or some of like the teams like the Hellbears and Fine. It's like you start really learning these players, you start really learning the histories, and you do get kind of that bias already in there. So having that like objective sense on one hand gives you like an outside perspective, but on the other hand, it becomes that much harder, and people have to take it more seriously. So like I don't know. I wonder if the cost benefit is enough unless someone's really trying to become like inundated and favored in a space, you know?
Yeah, if you're trying to cast from that perspective, you can only talk about the game, which most people could just get just by watching it themselves in the client instead of, well, you come to the cast to really see a, my brain is not working right now.
It's okay.
To see people talking about specifically the teams in correlation to each other, and they know what the stakes are. This is like lower bracket semifinals,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. You may not even know that if you just grabbed a team willy nilly from Caster's schedule. So you have a better idea of what's at stake, the lengths that and riskiness that teams can pull off with their drafts. Um, and there's a lot more to track. It's a lot easier to track what's happening.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and transition this a little bit because Chaos, you're doing a great job of just like getting me segues into these different ideas that I want to talk about. um, well, what do you guys? We'll lead off with Shap on this one because you've been casting other games and like done some stuff with your college before too. With Dota in general, what are your opinions on like the viewability of the game?
Dota is both an extremely fun and hard game to watch. It's extraordinarily difficult for anyone who doesn't play Dota to just kick up a stream and try and watch it because they just have no idea what's going on and it's almost a completely different language. But if you've played the game before, and the Slacks theory is just that Dota is intentionally miserable so that it's just way more fun to watch, and it's absolutely true. That's you see all the like BTS stream and uh Dream League, all whenever they stream, it's like 70-80K watching just pro Dota, and it's not like they're interacting with anybody. It's just them trying to watch Dota because it's fun to watch. And it's
And
almost
then the
like an
player
outlet.
count is much smaller.
Right,
Yeah.
it's like 2. So, it's, but yeah, it's definitely like watching Dota is almost an outlet for players because they can just have fun with these personalities casting and such.
If you can take a look at the Reddit, like it's a really common sentiment to see people say, "I don't play Dota anymore, but I still watch, and this is like my favorite team or what I like to see and stuff like that." And it's people who their idea of the game is like 6 or 7 years old now, but they still like watching it, even if it's just background.
It's
Yeah,
also it's also generally fun to just like get behind a team. It's just like any sports where it's just you get behind a team and you root for them.
yeah. There's also like an interesting stat about like Dota viewership on Twitch, and it's that like people who watch Dota rarely overlap on like any other game. Like CS:GO players will watch like Valorant or like Fortnite or something, but like Dota players, it's like 90% of them just only watch Dota on Twitch. They watch absolutely nothing else. So there's almost this like single-minded focus on just this game because of like the level of complexity, the amount of like investment it takes, and like the amount of knowledge that's required. And that's what makes like I guess like casts good, like being able to like deliver all of that to your viewers who like Shap said may not have picked up the game for 7 years, but they're still able to like be engaged and understand what's going on in the series or like whatever is happening on screen.
Are there any analogs that are like more traditional sports or anything, or like spectacles, I guess you'd say? Because I've heard people like compare Dota to basketball before. I've heard them compare it to chess, like all kinds of stuff like that. One of the things that I've always struggled with is thinking about the viewability and just how opaque it is. Thinking about what Licky said, where like the community is so cut off, and we love what we do, we love what we're invested in. But in terms of like outreach, or if I tried to show somebody else this game, like, I got Kitty into Dota by watching TI, but that's kind of like a 1 in a million thing. If I tried to get anybody else to watch TI or sit down with me as I'm like, yeah, watching a tournament, I think no one would have the patience. It would just be kind of. So I'm wondering if there's anything else in terms of like what you'd watch on TV that's similar in scope to Dota.
Well, I kind of think of, don't crucify me for this, but I kind of think of American football kind of like Dota in the sense that I don't understand it. I don't really care to understand it. And there's a lot of people get really hyped up about it and they talk about the strategy, and I'm just like, you get the ball on the other end, you destroy the ancients. I don't see all the dots that transpired to get to the end.
So do we need a John Madden personality in
Maybe.
You know, if you wanna win the game, you gotta destroy the towers.
That'd be fun.
I mean,
But I can't think of anything else that is quite as analogous, just to my perspective, not knowing what football is.
Out in the
yeah,
chat, Pansy's saying that the newbie streams that they used to do at TI were really hype, and he liked watching those over the main cast. And honestly, I was the same way when they still did that. But I understand why they don't anymore, because it's just expensive, it splits the viewership, and who knows if it's actually worth it.
yeah, those are always kind of like a cool idea, but like you said, it's a lot of work to put in to catch someone up on literally everything in the game. But thinking of like real world parallels, honestly, like what is there? Like what exists? Like that is it's everything is just so different. You'd have to take like half of one sport or like a third of one sport, a third of another, and then another, and like mesh it all together to find something that's like similar. Because like Dota's can be slow or it's like super fast paced, right? So you get like the fast paced similarities with something like basketball. You get like the tactics and like the movements around the map or field that you get with like American football, but then also like football or like soccer because there's a lot of like tactics and like positioning in those sports. Um, but then there's also just like so much other like strategy and like hero picking. Like, how does that translate at all? That's like you could compare it to like FIFA where you like choose a squad or a roster, or like I guess picking like a roster of players, but
You would
it's
need all your players who have like different lacrosse sticks
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
There'd be specific equipment that they would not only pick it for themselves, but they'd pick in response to whatever the other team has.
It
Yeah,
is really unique, and it's so hard to. That's one of the reasons why I struggle with this question constantly, is because to me, like at the heart of what casting is kind of making something like presentable, entertaining, and enhancing the viewability of, whether it's for the players, for the people who are watching it, making it be something that you don't have to be paying full attention to make it interesting. And it's so hard to find inspiration outside of like radio when you're thinking about Dota.
The closest thing that comes to mind for me is just like watching baseball, and because like those uh announcers or broadcasters, they've got to fill up all this space, and I'm deep in the baseball world, and there's just all this talk about pacing up the game because there's just not enough going on, but it's fun whenever something does happen. So it's sort of just the casters trying to fill in all of the space with pretty generally nonsense, just either what they're seeing or just whatever they're thinking about, and that's maybe the closest comparison I can draw. But again, like he said, it's the draft is just not comparable to anything else. There's just nothing like that.
I also think
Also,
it's really interesting. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you were talking about baseball, and whenever I think of like iconic announcers, I do think of a lot of like the voice of different stadiums, and I mean, have like even going back to Chicago with Harry Carey. It's it's kind of interesting how much a part of the cultural zeitgeist that once was.
Yeah, and I remember recently, Vin Scully. He was the last person to solo cast, and he cast the Dodgers for a long time. There was a huge thing. Whenever he retired, it was almost like a retirement tour of every team that came to Dodgers. It was like the opposite of a retirement tour. People just came repeatedly to the same place, and it was a big event, and it was great because everybody just knew and loved this guy who just did solo casting so well for like 50 plus years. It was awesome.
All right, any more thoughts on the same subject, or are we gonna keep moving on? I realize we've been really dragging, but at the same time, this conversation's really fun to me.
I think the only other thing is that the variability of the length of matches is crazy in
Oh
Dota. There
yeah.
can be 15 minutes. People can call GG, or it goes to a 2 hour slog fest where casters are literally dying because they have a best of five series to cast, and it's 3 in the morning now. So
Yeah, it's really hard to bring any sports comparison just off of that basis alone.
It really is like baseball in that way because of just how long things drag on, especially when the pitcher is still scratching his balls for 2 minutes.
That baseball's trash.
Listen, baseball is a great sport. I will defend it with my life.
All right. So, kind of, it's a similar question, though, and I think I know the answer for this one, but I'm going to keep it kind of light and just, like, quick answer on this topic. Licky, who do you think it is that we cast for, especially as part of AD2L?
Who we cast for?
Like, who's our target audience?
I mean, I think our target audience is just the AD2L community. I think there's very little cross viewership from other communities. I would say like the very small exception to that is if it's like a specific caster and they're like, oh, this person's streaming. What are they doing? Let me pop in here. But yeah, I think for the majority, it's casting for the community and also, I guess casting for yourself if you enjoy casting, which I would hope casters enjoy casting. But yeah, I would say mainly just to serve the community, really.
Okay. Is it like for the players' benefit, or is it for kind of the other people who like go back and watch it? Because like I don't know if you ever take a look at your metrics, but I know a lot of times you'd get like a couple hundred VOD views, and
Yeah.
you wonder, okay, this is more than just the team that was like in it, but is everyone else watching this? You know?
I honestly, now that you mention that, the numbers don't add up in my head because the teams aren't watching it like 10 times over. They're not
Right.
crazy. So I don't know actually who would be like VOD watching because I know the players really actually truly enjoy like going back and VOD watching. Like it's actually like a thing. Like it sounds like weird. Like they're just gonna go back and watch a cast like a movie and it's like 2 hours long. But no, they go back and watch the entire thing and they're like making clips of it and stuff like that. It's like it's a special experience for them. But the other 100 views out of the 110, not sure where they come from, but I guess they're enjoying it. Yeah.
They must be. I mean, it's pretty consistent. What do you guys think? Chaos, Shap, any extra thoughts on this one? Again, quick topic, quick topic.
I mean, yeah, I'm
Go
in
ahead.
agreement. It's largely going to be the team who played is going to be mostly for their benefit to see, okay, this is how there's that external perspective on how we play. How can we change that and make it better, especially with draft? Because you don't really want to like show your own draft to people, but you do want to see what other people think of your own draft. That's very important.
Pansy.
Yeah, it's hard for me. Terrible at analyzing drafts. I don't play like captain's mode ever, and I'm generally bad at the game, so it's hard for me to analyze draft. But it's definitely, I think, for the teams and also just the team's community in general, because pretty generally, like teams will have their own community, like because just like an entire Discord server of friends, people who might want to watch their games, and so it's definitely to their benefit and the team's community's benefits. And I think that might be where some more of the views from the VODs come from, is sort of just people checking your stream and seeing, oh, this game was casted. That's cool. I kind of want to watch that.
It's actually a really good point. I mean, we've got the entire Rats and Bunnies crew just chilling in chat right now. Well, not the entire ones, but all the important ones. Sorry, Rap and
The ones
Ness.
that matter.
Damn, had to do it to him.
Has to do it to him.
All right, so let's kind of move on from just the general casting stuff and kind of get into like more specific things. So, talking about like professionals and like higher tier casting and some of the more like organized. I know Licky and I have done some of the like more structured and like production style stuff, and I know Chaos has been on panel for a few of those before. But I guess before we even go in that direction, I kind of want to know, what do you guys think makes a professional caster? And like, is there something that you can tell just from the way that they approach their craft, as opposed to like a B tier, C tier kind of person? So I'm thinking of like the difference between, say, Gareth or Purge and like John Xfire or Avo Plus or Seek and Strike. if you're familiar with those names.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Chet.
I think part of it might just be sort of having a duo that works really well and sort of just having that like one in a million, sort of just finding someone who you're very compatible with and it's super easy to cast with them. Because like pair that I think of often whenever I think about it is like Sunsfan and Syndrome.
Yes.
And like those two just work so well together and they're a comedic duo and they just scream the game really well and they analyze. It's you sort of get the entire package with them. And it sort of just feels like that one in a million, just people who are enjoyable to listen to as you're watching this game. And I think that is part of it, sort of just finding that duo professionally that just works really well.
Yeah, I think building off of that, because I think that's a really solid point. Because I mean, we talked about Cap a little early on, but I think Blitz Cap was like one of the best duos out there for a
Yeah.
very long time, and I'm still really sad that it's gone because Blitz is coaching Liquid. God,
What a
but like that was one of like the most iconic duos up there with OD Fogged, and I think for a while, like not that Cap got worse because he's still like amazing. I think he's like in my like top 3 of like casters that I'm like, oh, this guy's casting, I'm paying attention for sure.
Mhm.
But like he didn't really have like that pairing up until like SVG came, and I think now those two have like found their footing together and they're like building and they've gone and done a lot more casts together and people are recognizing and they're like, whoa, this duo is actually really solid. So like to the point of that Shap was making about like duos, I think is like a huge part of it. And also I think it's like being able to like at least for like play by play, I think it's for like being able to create those hype moments. But then also like knowing what to do in the downtime. I think that's the biggest indicator of um like what makes like a proper play by play caster. Because I think anyone who's able to like yell or shout or like talk kind of quickly in a fight, but like what really like makes a difference is like knowing what to do when there's like nothing happening on the map or there's very small things, and it requires like game knowledge and also like chemistry with your partner. um and I think like OD Pixel is like the prime example of this. He just always somehow knows like what questions to ask
And
that
that's
like bring out something valuable, and it's just really great to watch.
that
and
was
also
actually
paying
one of
attention
the
when something's about to break out. He's like, well, let's get back to that, right into the action again. And
that was one of the examples I was going to bring up because when Fogged had COVID, uh, or he was sick or something like that during the Animajor, I think it was, or shortly thereafter, the right after the Animajor. Um, I felt like Owen actually was kind of falling off a little bit there because Fogged wasn't available, but it was largely because like a lot of the co-casters that he had there, he didn't have a lot of synergy with, and so you had Owen kind of fumbling looking for the things to say, the ways to get the segue and the questions, and it kind of wasn't like, and this is just my perspective, but I felt like there was a lot more fumbling and looking for ways of spurring up a conversation that his co-casters weren't picking up on. And so it just made OD Pixel look like he was fumbling and falling flat at that point in time. I don't know if you guys were watching or if you remember this, if I'm just a weirdo for thinking about it.
um I I don't know. Because I remember when Fog wasn't like present in there. Obviously, like it wasn't up to I think like the gold standard that is OD Fogged. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a more forgiving when watching the cast. But as I was pretty okay. I thought he was doing pretty well adapting because he was like swapping around with different people
Yeah, they
and he
kept
was like working with them, which I think was pretty solid of him to like be able to like be on his toes and work with a lot of different people. Because most like of the casters in like tier 1 tier 2 generally cast with the same
yes.
pairing because we've already talked about the benefits of having someone you like know really well and stuff like that. um but yeah, props to him for being like flexible and versatile, for being able to like do that. But yeah.
I think the only ones who really do get kind of tossed around like that are Lacoste occasionally OD Pixel and Purge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, you've got pretty much solid duos, and even then, Purge Moxie is really falling into place.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So thinking about it, taking it away from professionals a little bit, but just like kind of, that was getting an idea of what the top tier looks like. What kind of issues do we run into, like, as casters right now? Like, just kind of what are some of the problems that make things difficult? I'll kind of spear this one off myself because I'm a little bit retired, but I still do it once in a while. And one of the hardest things for me, actually, is when I'm doing just like a two-person cast, dealing with observing while I'm running the show, and like specifically trying to keep track of my hotkeys and like bouncing around to other points while I'm keeping a narrative. Like I find that really, really difficult.
If I may just, as a comparison, it feels like the difference between playing an instrument and playing an instrument while you're singing. You're doing two very different things at once, trying to excel at both. But a lot of times, you can feel like you're just doing both fairly mediocre. Very hard to track a team fight while also making sure the camera movement isn't janky or is catching the action that matters. Um, it's just so much. It feels like you're almost playing Dota while you're talking about it.
Yeah. I felt a lot of that whenever I first started solo casting, because back when I was duo casting, we also had like an observer as well.
Mhm.
So I didn't have to worry about that at the time. I could just move my camera however I wanted. But once I started solo casting, I had to really start thinking about what my camera was doing in every second. And it's sometimes you just forget and your camera's just in the middle of nowhere as you're just lost in thought. And there's just nothing happening. And it's hard to encapsulate people whenever you're doing that kind of stuff.
Don't worry, if you miss a team fight, I'm sure Carol will make a video about it and complain. Love you, Carol.
That's why you put it on directed camera when there's no team fight happening.
Oh god.
I don't. I actually prefer casting just through the lobby than through Dota TV, and it to me it just feels easier to do it through the lobby, and then I just have a 5 minute delay on my stream, which is another difficult thing. Is whenever you're sort of a small time caster, you want so badly to interact with chat, but if you have, you're not really not supposed to interact with chat whenever you're casting, so it's sort of like you're trying not to, but it's just right there. It's almost like being addicted to drugs, and there's drugs right there, but you know it's really bad for you.
Or you
Love.
could just interact with the drugs on a 5 minute delay.
That's true. That's also true.
Yeah. I mean, speaking to the observing point, I honestly, because I've done like a bunch of observing and done like focused on that for a while. I like just took time to just work on that.
Mhm.
At this point, I feel like I almost like enjoy observing more because when I've been on people's like streams and I'm just like chill casting and I'm like edge panning, it almost just feels wrong now. Like it feels like my like view of the game is just like worse. Or like when I'm just like spectating a friend's game, I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. This is like not okay. But I'm not gonna go and like open up pimp casting and then have to restart Dota again. But I think that's more of because if you just like focus on it like more or just do like dedicated observing, that's honestly one of my favorite things to do. Like you're not even casting,
Mhm.
you're just like doing your best to give the audience like the best view that they can while also like matching like what the casters are saying. I think that's just so much fun just trying to like make that happen. And then also the benefit of doing it in lobby is that you can like draw and like pull people's attention to like wards or like really cool plays and stuff like that. But
That's
It's
one of
a
my
very
favorite things to see JJ do is when he starts like drawing on the map or like pointing out wards or even just making little smileys.
yeah,
It's so good.
yeah,
it's a very defined role, but it's not like railroaded. You have so much freedom of movement and how you want to pursue it. It'll look bad if you scuff it when you should be catching something, but there's often just so many ways that you can look at a team fight and follow the section because it scatters. It goes all over the place. You can come back to what's important.
yeah. Just camera control is just such like it's such a high skill ceiling, I think. And I think it's like I don't want to say easiest way, but I think it's like the single thing that like will like elevate, I think, a cast, like the if you were to like swap like one thing out besides like having like a terrible mic. I think mic quality is like one of the most important things, because if they can't hear you, then what's the point? But just having like really like smooth camera movements and like showcasing the correct things is just a way to um just elevate a cast beyond like what's there. Because I mean, even like a lot of the like tier one casters, they don't like move the camera themselves. They just have like a
Yeah, they
they
have
have
the
whatever
PVM.
the obs is seeing.
Mhm.
They have that going on, and that's because they have like an obs that they can trust, and they know is doing a good job, and the casts are amazing. So it's like it's a great combination.
So what about like other issues though? I mean, observing is honestly one we could probably go on for a very long time about, but that's just, my perspective of the biggest thing that I struggle with. I don't know if there's anything that you guys find difficult or that like is a major room for improvement when it comes to your own casting or things that you also see.
Um, I guess no one else has anything. I think consistency probably is the most difficult thing to have, especially if you're like season casting. I think that's also like one of the things that marks like a really good caster, just being able to every game um you're putting out like really good content, which is really hard. It's hard to expect that of anyone. I think that's the thing that I probably struggle with the most. Where I like finish a cast and I'm like, that was average. That wasn't like great. It was like fine, and like the like people watching like got like a relatively good experience out of it. But I'm like, this wasn't like good enough, and just like being satisfied and trying to like pull apart your own casting and be like, what can I improve here? I think is honestly the most difficult, but because without getting like feedback from people, and usually people don't provide feedback unless it's like something obvious that you're doing, or they're like, stop flaming so much or something like that. um it's hard to like know exactly what you can do to improve with like your casting. You have to take a lot of time to look over your games and even like pay attention in the moment and be like, oh, I'm saying like a certain word too much, or I'm using this like turn of phrase or something like that. um yeah, I think it maybe just improvement is like the hardest thing, like knowing what to improve, I guess. Um, I guess just it takes experience and practice, yeah.
That's a really good call out actually, and I think that that's something that honestly there became a point for me, and one of the reasons why I kind of half retired is I got so self-conscious about how conceited I was. I know that sounds really stupid, but like I I would just like brag to people and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm so fucking good at casting and all this, that, the other thing." But like, there was a point in time where I started to believe it, and then I start looking for things to improve on, and I'm like, I don't know if I have the patience, if I have the time, or if I have the maturity to look back and say these are things that I can improve on, and I have to break that down myself and then build myself back up again. That's really hard.
Yeah, as someone with not a lot of experience in this field, right now it's mostly just feedback from people who I know who have been doing this longer than I have. And it is hard to sort of just go back and watch yourself and try to think this is something I need to improve, and to recognize that as yourself. It's definitely one of the more difficult things to do. And as time progresses, it's almost one of the only things you can do to get better is to recognize it yourself and try and rebuild that around that habit, not or and just stop it in general. Like, because I'll say anyways way too much, and it's something that's just ingrained to my brain. It's hard to decompose that.
There is another option here that hasn't been considered. That's just drunk casts. Right? You don't need to worry about your perception. People are there to just watch you make funny noises and then clip it later, and everyone can have a good time.
It's not an
I
option
Um,
for someone who doesn't drink, but I mean,
I mean, yeah.
Chaos is like, you better get
Just
on
gotta-
that right now.
everybody 5 shots right now.
Yeah.
I
I thought you were gonna just say just perpetually be bad is the other option. That's what I thought you were
Wasn't gonna
going with
say
it.
I once did an event for Math, who's out in the chat, where it was a like drinking and casting, and like the entire thing was, it was just like a weekend of people playing drunk Dota and drunk casting, and I felt like so self-conscious because I didn't have my usual co-caster with me, and I was like, I haven't drank in so long, and I'm doing this on my own. I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna just treat this like I don't care. It was really fun.
I think a really fun and interesting event would be to bring together like a bunch of just casters and players and just put them in the most uncomfortable environments imaginable and just see what happens.
So a reality TV show?
Basically.
I was gonna say taking all the AD2L people and putting them in a room in real life, I think would be pretty funny.
Oh god,
Like,
so
you
we're
got,
doing
like,
the
a
MD2L
rhino.
LAN.
it would
Yeah.
stink in there, I think.
Oh boy.
Oh, that it would
Yeah,
that would
those
be.
players don't shower. It's
They don't.
bad.
Can confirm.
All right. So let's move on from that though, unless anyone else has like things that they want to talk about that are like struggles or room for improvement. I know we're going all over the place, but it's just, a full view on casting and some of the good, the bad, and what our experiences are like. Okay.
The worst experience I had was when I was casting with Rusty Shackleford.
No. Okay,
No,
we're
sorry,
moving
sorry,
on.
sorry.
We're moving on. We don't
Uh,
need to see what the inside of a plink looks like.
Yes. But I think probably my best experience, I don't remember the exact details, but I remember some grand finals I was co-casting with Licky, and it was a great time. I don't even remember if I was the league I was tracking particularly, like I just knew the players, but I felt like we just had a really good blended dynamic playing off of each other.
I feel like that was like 2 seasons ago, I think.
I
If
think
I'm
so.
remembering correctly. Yeah.
I think that's something too where, okay, this is actually a really good question. So, you guys talked about, finding like your partners and everything. And I know, Shap, you've done a little bit of stuff like where it was structured, you kind of got thrown together with someone. And Licky and I, we've done like the co-stream thing before. But as you've gained more experience, have you found it easier to kind of pick up and cold cast with someone that you haven't worked with before? Or has that not been something that you've had the experience of doing recently?
I can answer that. Honestly, I haven't had like a consistent like co-caster for a while now. I've mainly just had a lot of people that I know that I've like worked with, or I'll pick up like new people, and add them to like a little like server where I'm like, hey, if you want to cast again, let me know. But I've rotated through like a lot of people. Just I'm like, hey, you want to cast? Like here and there, I'll just like cast with people. Oh, the cat's getting kicked out of the room.
no. I was gonna ask to show the cat. Pick up the cat, you know?
But now it's booted.
Sad.
But I honestly haven't like found a person where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like stick with them 100% of the time. They're gonna be like my duo. I had someone like a year or two ago, but then they like kind of like stopped doing like Dota stuff. Um, so I've only just been like flipping around and like casting with people, and I think last season I put in like casters. I was like, anyone new, I like want to cast with new people, like hit me up. I'm gonna be like covering playoff games. Please like let me know. And I found a few people that were like really fun to cast with. Um, and I think it's mostly just like experience and like listening.
Yes.
Just being able to be the one that like takes the back seat. And it's like asking questions, like bringing them out of their shell, figuring out like what they want to talk about, and really like shining a light on that. So like for those people, I think in like at least my experience, if I'm doing like play by play, I pretty much like only do like talking during fights, and then other than that, I'm like doing everything I can to bring out what they have to say, whether it's like staying quiet or whether it's asking specific questions that they have like the knowledge to answer or something like that. But it's honestly just like being like quick on your feet and a lot of listening if you're going to be casting with new people, which is really fun. I would recommend it. Always like taking the time to find some new people and cast with them.
I think Alleviate does a pretty good job with that. I often see new faces on her channel, particularly. Um,
She's one that I don't think I've seen her stop improving. Like it's kind of crazy and cracked because I ended up casting with her like one of the first times she was an AD2L, and it was the kind of thing where we didn't have much chemistry. Part of it was because I was still I'm bad at stepping on people's toes, but it was also just like the recognition that she was really struggling to find her voice and like what it is that she wanted to sound like. And I tune into her now, and it's extremely confident, and it's very aware of like what it is that she wants to do and how she wants to fit in with other people, and like that is so cool to watch. And once I think that there's like a corollary to that, like Licky was talking about, where as you get more experienced, you start being comfortable with having more than one voice, I guess you'd say, more than one style. I want to actually share a little bit of something I'd used to do in Rocket League, because one of my favorite co-caster in Rocket League stopped by the chat real quick here earlier. His name was Lars Newt. This guy's a pilot in training, like was a private pilot, and we'd just kind of sit around and BS and talk about Rocket League and everything, and occasionally do these casts. But he had a real deep and rich voice, kind of a little bit like mine. And the problem is that like if you have two voices that have the same texture, it kind of blends into each other.
We
So
can't differentiate.
exactly. So I actually like I changed around the way that I talked to try and find ways of getting not only differentiating the tone, but differentiating the timbre and like the character that I was playing there. And I feel like that's something that experience was really important for me, because it made it easier to work with other people, and I didn't have to be stuck so rigidly in this one idea, the one staged character that I occupied when I first came to AD2L. But I think that that's pretty similar, and I think that like Allie in particular, like you were talking about, has gotten really comfortable in not only just finding what she wants to say and talk about and occupy, but being able to be a little bit more diverse and work with the people that she brings in, and that's so awesome.
Hopefully, we get a bit more piano playing from her as well. That's always a treat.
I never
New
caught that.
strings.
I never caught that.
Yeah. Usually in a series between games, she'll play something, and it's really fun to listen to.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's just definitely an area I don't have as much experience in. I'm almost a little bit scarred from my early days of dual casting and just not knowing what I'm doing and just sort of being sort of self-conscious of like I know this is not good right now and I don't know what to do about it. And so I just been having a good time solo casting right now. I definitely want to get back into dual casting.
Mhm.
It seems like fun. It seems like sort of it seems like it would be fun to just change your personality to mesh with someone else. It's almost like acting in a way. And I think that it'd just be fun to just have this weird persona every time you pick up a mic and just like if some people just don't know what they're gonna get with you one day, and it's just I think that'd be entertaining to watch.
I've definitely seen some casting duos. Especially, I think the one thing that Dota has going for it is it's easy to have such a strict play-by-play and analyst and like color casting split. Whereas in one of the worst places I've seen that be is in Rainbow Six, where both are typically like kind of color casters, and you just kind of swap the action based on who's talking at the time. And it is really, really bad if they don't have synergy, or if they don't have like a good understanding of each other and how they want to play. I've seen some dismal cast that way.
I mean, that just sounds. I feel like any first-person shooters just could be awful as a spectator sport. So how do you make it even interesting casting it? That's just. I mean, unless there's like you have someone with like a top-down view all the time, it's so hard to see. In Dota, the observers, you see the same thing that the players see, and getting that to really translate of like how these players are adapting or how they're going to try to play the game is just seems impossible, at least for first-person shooters. Maybe I'm ignorant about how those are even cast.
It's there's a lot of like the meta narrative and understanding the state of the game. It's something that
Okay.
okay, so I'm not gonna pick on Shap here and everything, but there's a different experience in Dota having an immortal casting versus a guardian. And in a first person shooter, the same way, having someone who's very experienced in the game and understands like the flow, the state of it based on like how many people are remaining in Counter Strike, what the timer on the bomb is, what positions are there, the map, like it's a lot um it's a lot of understanding that you have to know before you can communicate that in a way that people who don't get it can understand, while still keeping it be exciting.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of insight that I just can't give while being exciting from sort of my low MMR standpoint. And just the title of most of my casts are just based casting, because that's just that's sort of what I have to go off of is if you want to see someone just not know what they're talking about, stumble over their words and look funny, that's what you're gonna get. So it's definitely not I'm not at a point where I can give true insight and meaningful explanations, but I can definitely make people laugh, which is sort of just kind of what it's all about. Is just entertaining, so I'm fine with it.
All right, I want to break into the last kind of structured portion before we just kind of go freeform until we feel like dropping. But I had we've had, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up in the first place and like have this discussion is in the AD2L feedback discussion channel. There's been a lot of talk lately about like casting in terms of like trying to incentivize casters, trying to pay people or get structure put into the league and like have matches that are like going to be kind of guaranteed or swapped around. Like there's a lot of ideas, they're all contradictory, but everyone, like having an asshole, has an opinion on this. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like the format of AD2L, the way that casting works, and kind of like the some of the difficulties or ways that we could move in a direction of just ensuring more consistency and like higher quality. Um, so first thing I want to talk about is the AD2L schedule and like the politics around different leagues in the amateur Dota community. And this is a really big topic, but one of the things that AD2L specifically does, and like other leagues try and stick to as well, is if you are a five player stack and you want to play competitive Dota on every single day of the week, you can probably find a league that will have you playing 5 days or 7 days a week. Like you can find 7 leagues and
Yeah.
you can find that setup. So basically, no league impinges on each other's days unless they're being assholes. Looking at you, RD2L Masters.
Yeah.
So, like, Thursdays are the lock for AD2L, and everyone in the amateur community understands that and doesn't step on each other's toes. Same way with, like, a lot of the Mondays for RD2L Monday, and, like, they have a couple of days for RD2L Division and everything. But, so, with that understanding, though, does the AD2L schedule affect casting or like impede it, make it better, worse? Like how does that fixed schedule and the understanding that there's these other leagues that have like fixed time slots and everything too affect casting availability and like the prospect of trying to improve quality or like the politics? There's so many questions in this, it's hard for me to come up with just one.
Well, for one thing, I want to distinguish groups and playoffs because groups are a lot easier to cast because you're always just going to have 2 games and you don't need to worry about like not making it in time to work the next morning. Playoffs, you're going to get better viewership because there's less teams playing and more attention, storylines happening, developing, but it's much more taxing to actually cast and engage in it.
Your boss is
Especially
going to
if
ask
games
you
drag
why you're
on.
hungover.
That too. But that's every day. So
Okay. Oh, okay. So that's actually a point I hadn't even thought about. Is like I've had that issue where the best of threes run so late in the night you feel like shit in the morning. But I hadn't even thought about the best of two versus best of three format.
it's especially bad when you're anticipating a 2-0. So you're like start taking the sleeping pills like at the 30-minute mark in game 2, and then the other team throws. So that didn't actually happen when I was casting RNB versus Grin Fury, but there's a moment Lulu and I were like, okay, this game is going one way. It doesn't look like it's shifted, and we're like, we both started saying, "I don't think we can do a third game. This doesn't work, and I didn't sign up for this."
You're welcome.
What was the question?
So I was talking, and I don't know how to make this be an easy, like, simple question, but how does the AD2L schedule, specifically the Thursday lock, affect casting and affect, like, the ability for us as casters or players to be able to cover games and get, like, a wide amount of games covered? Because, like, I think that's what one of the things that people are looking for is people are a little bit upset that just they don't get their games cast during the season sometimes or during playoffs because there's just so many games, so few casters.
And from that last statement, so many games, so few casters. I accidentally stirred up a little bit of drama in AD2L casting, and I feel just compelled to bring this up. There is a rescheduled playoff match and at this point there were few teams playing. So they were trying to spread out their casters, but there is another team playing. So I wanted to be polite, and so I just asked, "Is it rude to cast a game someone else is already casting?" And then everybody just exploded. They were like, this was just like the question nobody wanted to ask, but the question somebody needed to ask, and it just became a whole thing. But
I think that
basically,
was. Sorry, go ahead.
basically, uh, in general, the ruling was don't be a dick. If there's other games to cast, you should probably just cast those games. But it's not against the rules or anything.
Hmm.
So, but it's totally respectable, and so that's sort of one of the things about having the Thursday lock the Thursday lock allows for casters to be more spread out, and you don't and because you're not it's not just one person casting on different days for the same league. It's one day, so and you can't cast multiple games at the same time, so it's gonna spread out much more easily. And so it is a really good format, and it works well with other leagues too because then you don't have games impeding on other games usually, and it it generally works out well for both the casters and the players.
Because
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna, go ahead and talk, Lucky. I'll pick up after you.
Oh no. I was just gonna say that like at least for AD2L, which it's kind of weird, but like I haven't seen this as much in other leagues, but it feels like a lot of like the casting and playing like talent overlaps. And it's kind of like this unique phenomenon that exists in this league for some weird reason. I don't know why. Um, so like all the games being played on Thursday, and we see obviously like when playoffs comes around, the amount of casters increase. Case in point, Chaos and myself, um, after getting eliminated. But
Thank
I
you,
think
Pot
like
of Green.
shout out to Pot of Green. Um, but like the Thursday lock specifically, I mean, I think it just like allows like um casters to like always like be able to set aside time because I know like I think CETA lets teams just like reschedule over the weekend or whatever, like anytime over the weekend they can just like pick a game time, and that just seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Not having like a set time down, because even like MD2L, right, they all have set times, but there's like the reschedule option. I have no idea about Rain because I don't know if they're like fully established yet, but anyway, But like that Thursday walk allows for uh just like a reliable schedule to plan around and to cast. And if reschedules happen, then you've got like an extra game to pick up here and there. Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about AD2L in particular is, and I can't tell you what it is or why, because there's other leagues, I'm thinking MD2L, that have a very, very similar structure and a very similar sense of community. But there's something about AD2L I feel that like has, for me anyways, fostered a sense of like kind of establishing more relationships with the people on teams and like people around me. So like I met all of you guys through AD2L obviously, and I don't know you too well, Shap, but at the same time, like you're a pretty cool guy. This is the first time I've sat down and talked with you, and you're
Yeah.
awesome. Licky and Chaos, I've kind of worked with you guys in the past before, and like I think we get along pretty well. But it's also these communities start forming, and as it does, you kind of have this like want to go ahead and just like play Dota with the people that you're like casting for, or yet meeting and talking to and everything. And I think that for me at least, the combination of a couple of social anxieties and like personal things that went on, as well as just like a lot of the friends that I've met through AD2L and other communities wanting to build teams, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of time off of casting and I'm just going to play. And, I'm not a great player by any means, but it's just kind of a different role. And one of the things that, like, even if I wanted to get back into casting more, it would be difficult because, okay, we have the schedule lock, and a lot of, like you said, a lot of the casters are also players. So, like, during the season, you kind of get this huge lack of casters. And then during the playoffs, all of a sudden, we're all bad at Dota, so we come back and get eliminated, and now you've got everybody who's available to cast during the playoffs. So, like, I guess if you're top 8, you gotta feel really good about yourself because you're always getting covered, unless your name's Wild Daddy.
Yeah, sort of on the community. I'm fairly new to the community, like you said, and my dear friend Wasps was the only person I knew in 82, and he's sort of how I found out that these leagues were a thing. Was I just saw him in these tournament games, and I was like, "What is 82L?" And so I just looked it up and decided why not join it. But yeah, shout out to Wasted Unemployed. My
Mhm.
group, my kind of people, wasted and unemployed. Hell yeah.
I thought you said you didn't drink. Oh, but you were talking about the okay, no, we won't bring that up.
Yeah, no. But yeah, it's definitely been an enjoyable time to be a part of the community, minus a little bit of drama. But
Yeah.
overall, it's people are really chill. It's also fun to see people get excited about wanting their games to be casted, and
Mhm.
it's a pretty generally lighthearted and overall fun time.
Um, so kind of going forward then, and like addressing, this is some of the stuff that just the scheduling part of it does, but if we obviously they're like, because there's all these conversations in feedback discussion, because like people not only are saying, hey, we want to thank the casters and pay them and everything, there's also a lot of the talk about, we'll start on this question. Someone had said that they're worried that, if we were to start bringing money into the casting sphere, that it would get really political. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I'll try and find
Um,
the exact post on that, but it's going to be buried a couple days back.
I think anytime money is being handled and delegated from people to others based on some agreement, it gets kind of fishy. But this is kind of a tangent, but there's been like 2 or 3 times that I've cast someone's game and they're like, "Thanks for the cast. Can we pay you for that?" I was like, "Well, I don't want to give you my Venmo, and I
Yeah.
just consider that just on
Yeah.
me, I guess." But I feel like that would be more healthy. Would be for especially for teams that aren't getting a cast. Like, hey, can we get someone to cast a game? I'll pay you for it. That
Right.
seems way more healthy than we're gonna
pick some casters or do a rotation and they get paid for doing this, or just because you need someone to arbitrate that, like
Yes.
not only who's casting it but who is going to be casted, and then ensuring fairness for everyone in a league where literally no one wants it to be fair. Just look at feedback discussion. It's just I hate this playoff format because I'm being eliminated. Not because like you never see someone argue like, oh, this I'm going to be eliminated because of this playoff format, but it's the one I want. You never see that. But like, I think it'd be more healthy if any monetization of casting was strictly independent. I
Yeah.
don't know. I feel like that would be much just better for the scene.
I definitely agree, and kind of to we'll get to this in a little bit. I'll talk about some of the issues with the when we were doing the centralized casting stuff, and this was back in like 30, 31, somewhere around there, and some of difficulties that came in that, and like how I feel that if we were trying to go in with some of this, the monetary compensation stuff that's centralized, it would have a similar set of problems to what I ran into. We'll talk about that later. Yeah. Any other thoughts then on kind of like the possible like political ramifications of this, or like the difference between a centralized or a decentralized set of payment if we were going to do that kind of way?
I think. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that monetization in general just makes everything more complicated because not only is it is healthy for teams to do it independently, but there also has to be some amount of set structure and rules because you can't just have a team paying like $50 a week to someone just to cast their game because they want it to be cast. Like everybody's just going to be going for that, and then it becomes almost like a battle royale of who can try and monetize that the fastest, and it's a little bit messed up. So adding money to the situation just makes it more complicated because you don't want it to be centralized and you don't want it to just like be the league just handing out money to people casting, but at the same time there has to be a set amount of rules imposed by the league to stop any sort of like monopoly on that and just make it so that there's just more it would end up I think with more games left uncast.
Yeah,
And
and it also kind of leads to frustration and everything. Like,
yeah, like if you're just there to cast for fun and you're just seeing all these games getting taken up by people who aren't even there for like fun, who are just looking to make some like quick cash while they're doing that. I mean, I'm sure people would still be doing it for fun, but you definitely see an uptick in or a uptick in games casted and not as much availability, and it's sort of sucks for the person who's not really looking to do it for money, who's just looking to do it for fun and uh just
All I know is Champion League games pay the bills. Like, these Explorer League
Yes.
games, that's can hardly afford chewing gum with that.
yeah, it's and the thing is these teams are already paying an entry fee to get into the league in general,
Mhm.
so you don't really want to force them to pay any more just to have like a caster, which is something that people are definitely willing to do.
Or just paying for something that ends up not going to be utilized
Right.
for them or go into what they're doing in any way. At least with what we have now, like it's guaranteed you've got what 6 weeks of groups, and then you might go further. It's a little more contentious this season because just 18 playoffs. But it was a cool experiment, regardless of what you think about it. But yeah, as far as are you getting your money's worth, it was much more clearly defined when, well, it's not going into someone else being casted. It's all going into just your tournament fee.
I'm thinking about talking about the you were talking about whatever your thoughts are on like playoff format and everything like that, and my thought on it is that every time we go into playoffs, regardless of the format, there's always a ton of drama that goes. And I'm pretty sure that someone on the admin team is just intentionally setting it up so that they just get more interaction around playoffs and like
It's Gambit.
yeah, they're like farming they're farming interactions on Twitter, you know?
It's about the publicity. All marketing is good marketing.
Exactly. That's how you get AD2L to get more people in every time.
Goat Satan's Reddit
Because-
post.
Yes. Goat Satan was in
Always-
on it the whole time. He was just trying to boost AD2L's numbers. What a
Um,
saint.
I mean, talking about the compensation idea. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, which everyone's covered, like the amount of infrastructure. I think that would be like necessary to start it off. Like even before you get into the realm of like giving anyone any money, there's like a ton of planning that has to happen and be involved, and it's up to like the people involved and whether they're able to do that and also like keep it going because it's a lot of work involved. And I mean, people in chat are also bringing up really like good points that I like had in my head where it's um like how much compensation is compensation that is like enough. Is it like just a small amount to be like here's just a little like, hey, like we appreciate you, or is it like something that's actually like substantial? Obviously I don't think anyone's going to be making their living on AD2L casting, because that's just like out of the realm.
Yeah,
But
that's way beyond the pale.
I think like the point that was brought up about like teams just like paying casters is like an interesting one. I think it's like a cool thing to be like, if you appreciate a cast, you can like do something, but like I think also like making that the norm is just like so. I don't know. There's like so many levels to this. I think like if you like appreciate a cast, like follow like sub to the caster. Honestly, like shout them out. Like in the Discord or something like that. I think there's a lot of like options because it's very hard to. I would love to like inject like money and like grow what we're like tier 3 scene in terms of casting. Tier 4 maybe, I don't know the exact number, but like it would be amazing, I think, to like grow this scene and potentially have upward movement. I mean, we have like Math Magician in chat who like he said like he's trying to break in, right? And it's extremely difficult, and I think it would be awesome to like be able to create infrastructure and grow that. But it's incredibly difficult, and it depends on like how much money would actually help, and then that amount, like what other issues it would cause. We've already like talked about all like the potential things that might pop up when we get money involved,
Right.
but I don't think it's like inherently bad. It's just something that will require a ton of effort. And I mean, it's the same way where people are like, we should just have more like grand final panels and like full production. And it's like, first of all, we've been having them for like 4 seasons in a
Right,
row. So
right.
you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
You're just taking them for granted. And that's my pet peeve. We'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll rein myself back in a little bit. But like it's like they don't see they're not really seeing the other side of it, where there's like so much thought that has to come into it. And it would be so amazing, and I would love to do it. And I've already like started discussing things with some of the admins. I'm like, yo, what can we do actually here? Like, what's feasible? Um, but yeah.
So, I want to kind of do like a little bit of discussion and actually kind of go into the direction of talking about some of those panels and like some of the work that goes into that, because that's some really cool shop talk that I think most people aren't really aware of, like what we actually do for that, unless they have been paying attention. But I want to come clean with you guys on a couple of things in terms of like my history and some of the stuff that like I've been trying to do subtly, or at least I've been thinking about. And so, first off, back when I was doing a lot of casting and doing a lot of the coordination stuff and tried to get that whole casting server put together and like that jam, um, I did get like a small payment from the admin team for like all the work that I had been doing. It was a one-time thing. It wasn't much money, but it was just like kind of a, hey, we recognize what you're doing for the league, and so like that is something that happened to me, and like there has been transactional money that has been going to casters before, but it's the kind of thing where it's not a regular thing. It's not something that is like per game or per anything, and it's not something that anyone should be expecting. It's just that like, hey, that is something that happened at one point in time. Secondly, in terms of like my motivation and what's always been in the back of my mind, and recognizing that like, hey, these are conversations way bigger than I can handle and way bigger than I can think about, but it's still the kind of stuff I think about, is one of the things that like I have been kind of optimizing for when I think about casting, when I think about production, is the ability to create meaningful metrics to outside marketing. And not necessarily for the sake of, like, hey, I want to appeal to a sponsor and do this. It's more along the lines of if Seth at some point decides that he wants to try and expand the league and, like, look for outside funding, being able to say that we have these metrics and they are meaningful metrics and important metrics, and these belong to AD2L and not to some independent part of it, would be something that he could use for that. So, like, when I was working with the centralized channel and everything, one of my motivations for that was being able to have those metrics available if Seth decided at some point he wanted to expand. It's not saying that he should. It's not my decision, but that's just kind of what I was thinking about. But go ahead.
Sorry, question on that. Just to like clarify. So like, what do you mean like specifically? So like, what would be an example of like what you want to have like prepped and ready? I guess to like expand on this a little further. Not
Okay,
to, like,
so
throw you off track too
no,
much.
no,
but-
that's actually a really good question. I've been in the streaming scene for quite a while, and I've, like, even if I haven't been successful by any means, I've been around a lot of people who really wanted to be successful and never did. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is, like, what metrics matter when it comes to sponsorships? What metrics matter when it comes to getting other people interested in a stream, in a organization, in a YouTube channel, or something like that? And one of the things that I discovered pretty early on is, especially on streams, VOD views don't matter. When it comes to YouTube videos, your view count on that doesn't matter unless you're looking at 5 or 6 digits, and usually 6.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to concurrency, as far as live broadcasts go, the numbers that people are actually interested in on that are absurdly low. So, like, you can even look at things like Intel or AMD and, like, technology companies, and with 3 digits of, like, concurrent viewers, it's not outside of the pale if you have a good branding setup to have them be willing to throw some money at it for, like, a little corner ad. And, like, I'm not even saying that, like, something intrusive. I'm saying if you take a look at when we were doing community gaming, they had a corner overlay that was just an ad piece there, where they had a
Yeah,
couple
that
of
was pretty
sponsors running
small.
through.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't intrusive. It didn't cover any of the game elements. It was like this tiny little thing where they were making money off of it. And I recognized that, like, if you wanted to go in that direction in terms of marketing, you can get that off of concurrency. But if you're looking at trying to have that be an option, again, I'm not saying that this is something that I want to do. I'm not saying this is something I want Seth to do. I'm saying this is, like, if somebody wanted to go in that direction, it enables them to do that. Then having good concurrence means that you can get non-obtrusive advertising and money into a scene for relatively minimal negotiations costs.
And I I don't know that much about the marketing, but I think the problem with doing that in a league like AD2L
Mhm.
is you sort of have to come up with a more centralized almost business where you it's not all these people running different streams. Now it's just one hub with maybe a few streams running,
That
but you're gonna
was
have and
that
then
was
you're gonna
part
have
of. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, you're good. And then it's sort of just like if you have a central stream running, then there's just a bunch of games that are just gonna not be viewed because now you just have a central game that you have to decide, and all these other people are just kind of left in the dark.
If you're promoting stuff that isn't marketing, like what's the
Right.
point?
Right. And so one of the reasons why, like, one of my inspirations on this, as I got into AD2L, I was also doing some work with a Rocket League organization called MLE. I just had a brain fart there. And they did a really good job of kind of being a combination of a, like, media conglomerate and a really player-focused league. Like, they literally had a gated Discord where people had to apply to play in the league. And, like, they made sure that, like, you weren't toxic, that you were, like, not smurfing and everything like that. They had a whole application process that I had to go through just to get into their Discord before I could do media, let alone play. And this was like a really, really professional run league. Now, they're not quite the same as they were when I was doing work there because they had a bit of a fiasco with one of the organizers. It wasn't even like a major thing. It wasn't like controversy, but it was enough to get him kicked out, and he was the person who was handling a lot of the administrative stuff. So it's kind of gone downhill in terms of like the sponsorships and partnerships there and everything. But it was one of the things I wanted to kind of tool around with and everything was just seeing if there was a possibility of bringing that kind of professionalism and media savvy to Dota.
Hmm.
And I can like show you guys some VODs. I've linked them all over the place before in terms of like what MLE has done and how just snazzy this shit is. Because it's not like sanitized and watered down. This is really organic. This is really like a bunch of college students and young adults in their dorm rooms and in their rooms and everything casting this stuff and like a bunch of kids playing. But at the same time, it comes across as being really professional. It's such a cool vibe.
I think
That's neat.
I think that'd be a really cool idea with Dota, and the only problem is sort of just that games are slow. With Rocket League, it's a 5-minute match, and
Exactly.
it's action happening constantly. So I think the approach you would kind of have to take with doing something like that in Dota is almost like watching a golf broadcast where you're sort of switching between different uh rounds, different people playing, and you'd
Oh,
almost have to like
actual
rotate
golf.
between games. Yeah, no, like not golf the team, no. Like
Yeah.
actual golf, like just watching golf on TV, like rotating through different games almost, and like trying to
Huh.
just catch action when it happens.
That
And
is honestly an
the
idea that I had not thought about before, but it's kind of interesting.
it's interesting, but the problem is just the complexity and the scale that it would have to run at, especially in a league like AD2L where you have 6 to 8 games running in each division,
Yeah.
and you want to be able to cover more divisions than just Divine.
Mhm.
So it's kind of just like it's a scale thing at this point where it's just like it's hard to get into it when you're already have the league at this sort of scale.
And
Yeah.
that was
The
kind of
issue
the
with that.
conclusion that I came to, is that a lot of the ideas that I had and the things I wanted to emulate just weren't possible for Dota. And that's okay. And it still kind of like holds in the back of my mind as like this is the kind of thing I would like to optimize to and like try and figure out a way of doing. But I'm okay with it not being there, and I am fully okay with just kind of going forward and thinking about trying to make casting better as an ecosystem, because
Mhm.
all of the marketing stuff and everything like that and all of that bullshit is just a side effect of having a really good ecosystem. Like, even if you can't market something, you still don't have the possibility of doing that if the system sucks and if the people are bad at what they do and everyone's not enthusiastic. That's just a
Now,
way of selling it.
now we did see something kind of what you described when TI rolls around and they're going through groups at TI. You'll have like a main broadcast that tries to jump between action,
Mhm.
and it's not really adequate because there's the kind of game where like you're not just interested in a fight in the mid game. You kind of want to see how did it get to this point. How does it result from draft? But it was still a very cool execution and use of technology when the uh the Valve broadcast was hopping between games, showing not only just cool fights, but how it's going to impact the next games and like is this a cool strategy that other teams might look at and use? So there is an element of that. It just
That might be
you
something
need
that
to
would be
develop
fun.
in order to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It would be something that
Yeah.
would be fun to give a shot at, but it's also
Yeah.
like recognizing the scaling on that is absolutely disgusting.
It's the kind of format where it really works on a professionally done panel where you have people who are able to just pick up on a game and just sort of be able to explain how a team got there and why the fight could impact the rest of the game. But whenever you're talking about the scale of people who are just doing it for fun, who don't have 10 people behind the scenes running through either replays or just observing games in general and letting the analysts know what's going to happen. Because that's something that they do behind the scenes that people don't really see is there are people talking to the analysts who are sort of giving them like, we should go to this is happening right now and it's
Exactly.
interesting.
You would
So-
need someone. I feel like the easiest implementation would be you take people's Twitch streams already, and then like someone recognizes a cool play, lets the main broadcaster know, hey, tune over to this feed, and you just take their feed and highlight it for the duration of the fight, and then you go back to your regularly scheduled programming or whatever. And that's already sounds insanely hard to actually pull.
Yes.
Well, all we have to do is just make sure we have the SRT relay that everyone's receiving, and no,
It's gonna cost so much money.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I could actually do that. I don't want to.
Nobody wants
So-
to, I think.
I have a crackhead idea that I've been mulling over for the past like 30 minutes.
Okay.
I don't really want feedback on it because I know it's shit.
Hey,
But,
I gave you my shit idea. I give you my
well,
shit
so-
idea. So
So, kind of with the idea of, I think it's, what if we had a dedicated broadcast on auction? So, like, you have the normal matches Thursday. Some team, they're like, I want this game cast and I want to throw money at it, and so they put a bid this weekend, get dedicated talent, and then the league is like, okay, there's an offer, can we fill it? Let's find what casters are available and can do it, and they put together the production, but the onus is on the teams that are going to play or someone who just really wants to see it professionally done. I mean, it doesn't need to be on the team, but kind of having that on auction. And maybe you could even do too if a lot of people want to do this. But that idea to me sounds more palatable than making it all start from the top.
Right.
And so just do it at the very like the base layer. Support what you want to see, and then other people can tune in and watch. And maybe like if it's running from the official league broadcast that's never used anymore, then you could add your marketing, sponsors, whatever else, or use the sponsors from whoever paid for it in the first place if they want to put their fucking wood shop out in Alabama out on the broadcast or something. I don't know.
No, that's
Maybe
a
Purple
pretty.
Pansy can sell the shower heads over on the broadcast.
It's a pretty nifty idea, and it's honestly like that. Why I love having these panels is because all kinds of stuff I've never thought of, whether they're good ideas or bad ideas, and you asked for no feedback, so I'm not going to say anything. But I like that. I like that we can bring that kind of stuff up, and just like all of these things never talked about are really interesting.
Sorry, quick question
Go ahead.
about that idea. Just to clarify in my own head, is that like the similar to like the game of the week idea where like one game each week is like highlighted, but it's like teams bidding to like have their game highlighted, if I understand correctly? Is that what you're saying?
The issue with the game of the week is that like who's going to decide what the best game to watch is? That is, well, it excludes everyone else that is going to play, and we just make a very easy deciding factor. The money talks. Whoever puts
Okay,
the
so-
highest bid, they are the game of the week.
Yeah, that
For all intents
that
and purposes.
that decision murdered me when I was running the server, and we can talk about that a little bit later too, because like I'll probably close out with that discussion. Is that a little backstage pass into how that process just kind of fell apart for me. But so I kind of want to move on a little bit and get to like one last discussion piece before kind of like opening up and freeforming and closing things down, I guess. And Licky, I'd kind of like to have you lead this one off because you were talking about like paneling and all the stuff that we do for grand finals. Can you give us kind of like just a behind the scenes look into some of the work that you do for a lot of this stuff? Because I know I kind of started it a little bit a couple seasons ago, but since then you've and Zen have really kind of taken stuff off and gone to town with it. You, Zen, and Finnick really have spearheaded this stuff and turned it into a real event.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about that. I mean the the main thing is just finding. I think the first step is finding someone who, one, just has the technical ability to do it, whether it's like knowledge, but also like the machine and internet connection. Because there's quite a few moving pieces to deal with. I learned a lot from, again, like what Stage did like that time with our like AD2L production thing in terms of like OBS Ninja and things like that, where you can pull in like cameras, and I like pulled a lot of that in. But it's a lot of like running OBS yourself and being like aware of that. I know like Zen, he's doing that all while casting. I usually do that myself, but then sometimes for grand finals, I just do like production and observing and be like, hey, any casters that want a platform, please let me know. I'll give you production and you can just do whatever you want, like go wild. Um, but like specifically about the behind the scenes aspect, I think there's a lot of like previous preparation, which people don't get to see. I personally just do a lot of research for teams, especially when it comes to grand finals. Like spreadsheet worth of research. Um, just to like know the teams and to be able to talk with them. But then specifically for panels, um, you need to be like reaching out to find like people to go on the panels, and you need to make sure you're finding like the right people, because a boring panel or like a dysfunctional panel is like miserable to watch, and that's kind of on you for like picking the people. So you have to like put a lot of thought into like who's on the panel, like who's the host, or the other two people that are going to be like functioning as analysts, like what actual insight they can provide. Like you can just pick popular members of the community, but it's not always going to work out like how you think it will. Like I could get like Rhino and like Hungry Phoenix and like God, I don't know who else who always has, and I got this on a panel together, and people would be like, "Holy shit, let me tune in," but like it could be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Like
It absolutely would be.
it could just
I
be
think
like an utter disaster. So like there's just the aspect of like choosing a panel roster, which just requires thought and a lot of like preparation and like figuring out like who you want. I'd say like choosing a host is probably the most difficult thing. I've had like staged host before because he like understands like the flow of like conversations, and obviously he's like hosting this right now. And like Gambit is another, but it's very difficult, I think, to find proper hosts that are, one, are willing to do this multiple times, and then two, have the ability to do it. To bring out someone like out of their shell and things like that. Um, and then I guess production wise, just making sure you have like a polished product, um, having some like nice music, having like a panel screen that gives people the information if they're joining in, like which teams are there, what's the score, things like that. And then also for like the draft, I have like a specific scene in OBS just for like drafts for like playoffs and panels and stuff like that. And there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, just for like the PSGS Invitational, I don't know if anyone um like hear like how much you saw of that, but like I like put in about like a couple hours worth of work one night. I just like sat down with my OBS and figured out like what I was doing. Even like the simple thing of having like the font match the background, like that took time. Like there's so much involved with making a panel which everyone's like, or like this grand finals production overall, where people are like, man, we should have that. We should have that so much more. Um, but there's so much that they don't like see that's involved, and even the simple fact that like OBS Ninja cameras like suck and like freeze every like 30 seconds, and you have to be on your toes watching to like refresh it, and if you're on like a 5-minute delay, then you see someone in chat saying it and you're like, oh shoot, have they been frozen for 5 minutes? Like then you have to go back and check. And if you're like observing or if you're casting at the same time, then it's like you need to find a pause in the game for you to quickly tab over to OBS and refresh the source as quick as you can, and then go back in and hope that nobody notices that like the camera stopped moving or that your like focus slipped. Like there is, even like if we want to go down to like the minute details, there's like so much there in like doing this, and yeah, I could talk for more, but please, anyone else add input.
I,
I
Go ahead,
I think
Shap.
you just need to understand what directed camera is, Licky, and that will solve all your problems.
Directed camera is a sin on this earth.
It's so bad.
It's a sin.
It's awful, truly awful.
You were gonna say something, Shap?
I was gonna say sort of what he was talking about before. Finding the right people to be on a panel and know what they're doing, and it's more than just getting names. And I was sort of thinking about a really good example of that is sort of watching Jenkins cast. Jenkins makes amazing content, very hilarious, but you watch him on a panel or casting, and some of his stuff sort of just falls flat there, and it's sort of just like he's much more in the realm of content creation, like making his own content rather than voicing over or casting. And you sort of get the idea of when he's on a panel and like he'll do like a replay review in between games, and it's sort of just like hard for him to really get like a grasp of everything that's going on just because he doesn't do it that often. So it is
Don't do it
about
staged. I know what you're
yeah,
gonna
it's
do.
it's
Oh.
not just about getting the right, like it's not just about getting the names, it's about getting the right people as well.
Necrophos.
No.
It was some Dream League event where Jenkins' content was him staring into a camera for 15 seconds and then saying,
Like, yeah, that's funny, but it's just not like it's hilarious. It's amazing. It's just not caster material. Is what I'm saying. It's like if I'm just randomly here, I'm going Necrophos.
Yes.
Like it's not entertaining for the entire time. It's a good bit. I won't deny that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jenkins.
I mean, I think even adding on to your point, something I've noticed is that like I guess like once you're like you like focus on panels and like casting and stuff, you start to notice it in like professional streams as well. But like
Mhm.
I like noticed that like certain panels they literally just don't provide anything.
Hmm.
Like these are people that have like been on the scene for like years and years, but they're just like saying like this regurgitated stuff about like drafts and stuff like that. And that's why whenever like we see like this new like injection of like either like a pro player or someone who like legitimately has done their research and knows what they're talking about and they're able to like call the draft and things like that, I'm like, wow, they're giving me this perspective that I could there's no way I could have. And that like that's what's important. Like finding that in a panel. Because sometimes on these DPC streams, I'm like, yeah, okay, like you've told me that like Puck's a good hero, but like I understand the meta. Like I have a brain. I've like I like watch Dota. I play Dota. I can Google Dota 2 Pro Tracker and look at win rates. Like these things are like really like obvious things. Like which I mean I guess maybe they're like playing to like a lower common denominator, but for the most part like that's not what Dota streams do. Like they're not like super like pandering to like new players or anything like that. Like people can still learn on the stream and it's not like super high level where they're like using like crazy acronyms or something like that. But it's just like sometimes these panels have really like base and like surface level analysis. And then other times it's really amazing and you really start to like notice the difference and it makes you like consider and to take into account like what actually makes a good panel.
And then
I'm-
you have
I'm
like
gonna
BSJ Kyle panels, and you're just like, why am I listening to
God.
this?
I'm gonna agree with you a little bit here, and I'm actually gonna say that there's a specific element that the DPC talent have been missing out on lately that actually makes that pretty difficult, and it actually comes down to the host. Shiver, in particular,
yeah.
is really good about trying to get people to talk down some of what they're saying and like bring it down to like kind of something that asking the questions that archons and like crusaders would have. But one of the things I've noticed, and I'm not like calling out anyone individually, these are just like the names I have off the top of my head, is like Tsunami is much more interested in keeping things light and entertaining and more of like kind of content PC for the talent than trying to like satisfy curiosity because Tsunami's a better player.
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of the new talent in the scene that they've been occasionally using as hosts, the one I'm going to specifically call out here because I love the guy, I think he's incredibly human, is Avo Plus. I think a lot of those guys have been really good for trying to coax out some of the more basic stuff from talent, especially Effie. But I feel like some of the more legacy talent have just gotten so complacent with their role that they're kind of trying to make things lighter and more interesting and less about the game, so it means the analysts just kind of get away with saying nothingisms.
Yeah,
I think
wholeheartedly agree.
that's actually kind of something that people who are not as good at the game who enjoy casting somewhat have an advantage of, especially if they're casting with an analyst who really knows what they're talking about. Is they can ask the right questions that sort of everybody's wondering, but maybe someone who's just high MMR and already knows the answer and isn't really thinking about it that way, they might not ask that question. They just might not think to ask that question. And it's definitely something that someone who's even learning the game as they're casting, it's definitely a question that they would ask and something that everybody watching would be super interested in.
One of the reasons why you don't necessarily learn elementary school math from a college professor.
Yeah. And it's sort of like the thing where you get into high school and you start taking all these complicated math classes, but then you say 2 times 3 is 9. Like you sort of just forget to go back to your basics and it's very different whenever you're doing it for other people as well, but uh sometimes you do just have to go back to your basics, even if you've done it before on stream. It's always just a new audience, and you just want to keep them captivated.
Mhm.
And the meta's always changing, so it's never a bad thing to talk about new matchups. And then something that Licky was talking about was sort of, especially earlier, was uh, professionals who've been eliminated joining a panel. So like, especially someone like Seb, who went from coaching to being a player, so someone who's done research on basically every matchup in the game and is able to bring sort of a new perspective and is not just talking about what the draft is, but sort of talking about what each team is going for, the matchups that you can be expecting, and sort of the bans you can be expecting, which is something very difficult for people who don't know the teams to get, is sort of the bans you're expecting. Because it's not always just meta bans. It's maybe something that someone's spamming and you just want to throw them off guard and you just want to make them adapt because you know they might have difficulty with that. Like, it's
Or
something that maybe an analyst.
it's things that answer what you're hoping to do or like what you've done, and the logic isn't always plainly understandable to your average viewer. So
Right,
just being
because
able to
not
shorthand that is good.
yeah,
We
not
just
every
pull a
pick is
Mad
just meta.
Max and you just ban in descending alphabetical order because you don't know what else to ban and you don't respect your opponent. That
I
happens.
bad moments.
All right.
Uh,
But kind of going back to like where we've been with AD2L though, because we've kind of diverted a little bit. So yeah, the panels are really, really difficult to like staff with the right people, and I know that when I was doing the centralized stuff and everything, I would have like 6, 7, 8, 10 DMs in a week between people just looking for people who would be aware of the right teams and like contacting captains being like, do you have anyone who knows your team that you can like put up for a panel? And like just there's so much that is it goes into just finding the right personnel before you even think about are they available. And I think that that's kind of one of the reasons why things were so difficult when I tried to centralize this. So let me kind of back this up a little bit, and for those of you guys who aren't aware of I think it was around season 30, I'd put together a server and a team and a lot of people where I tried to do a game of the week or match of the week. And I was going between divisions. So each week I would try and find a different division so that we'd get like everybody covered during the regular season. And I would find a match that I thought was going to be good, and like I would do the research and find like this is going to be a competitive match or this is going to have like some kind of storyline implication. And I would message the captains and say, "Hey, are you guys available to reschedule for the weekend?" And if they said yes, then I would put together a team as fast as I possibly could
Mhm.
of casters, and I would go with someone who's been covering either these teams or that division. So, for instance, Shap, if you were covering like Challenger, then when I get to the Challenger week, I'd look for you and I'd be like, all right, I want to do everything I can to make this be a good production for you and to enable you. Do you want a dedicated observer? Do you want this, that, the other thing? Who do you want? Or, like, I'm gonna put together a panel for you.
Right.
Do you have anyone that like is that you have in mind? I'd contact the captains. I'd say, I want to put a panel together on this. Do you have a rep for your team who can talk about your team? And like, we would go through all of this shenaniganery in about 3 days because I had to find the reschedule, and then between the schedule being released, pushing a reschedule, and the game, I had to find a panel and get all this stuff set up.
And it's not even that. It's also just because you said you would ask me, do I want a dedicated observer? Do I want anybody specifically on the panel?
Mhm.
It's also reaching out to those people. And if they're not available, then you're just going to start having to sort of reach out, and it's going to lower production, which you don't want to do, especially if you're doing something like Game of the Week where you're trying to advertise it as much as possible. You want to get as much production value out of it as possible. So it's just becomes really complicated once you start messing with people's schedules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like the idea is definitely there. It's like you want to publicize a game that you think would be really fun to watch, has a storyline, etc. And it definitely is. It's fun to be able to watch, even especially when you know someone, to watch them be sort of recognized by an entire league.
And I mean, we would on a Saturday, which was violating the AD2L rule of Thursdays are sacred. We would get 50 concurrent viewers for an Archon match. It was actually kind of crazy. In the middle of the season, not even a playoff match, not even something that was an elimination match. Middle of the season, 50, 60 viewers concurrently. We did this. And we'd only been doing it for a couple of weeks, but we nailed the production and everything. But the problem is that, okay,
Sustainability.
not only that, when you do this, it delays the schedule for the next week because you don't have all the games being played on Thursday. So suddenly you have even less time to prepare for the next week. And the entire thing just starts pushing and like making the schedule and like everything getting really, really stressful.
You
So-
could do it bi-weekly, though. I
Yeah,
don't know,
and
it would be a
it's something that
tough
like
problem.
bi-weekly is probably a better idea, or like limiting it to playoffs, but I got so ambitious with this as an idea, and I wanted to do so much, and it just wasn't viable. And even if I'd put like together a team or a panel of people who were organizing this, it still has to go so quickly and so seamlessly and so consistently that I don't know, I feel like it would burn out just as fast as admins do.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, that's true. It's pretty true.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
I think like I guess branching off that, I guess it's like the kind of like happy medium, I guess. Not really, but for lack of a better term, that we're at right now is like individual casters that are like putting on like a little more like production than like normal. And I think if we get enough people like doing that and like in on that, then we can build that to like something more where we have like multiple people comfortable with this like level of production, because like the amount of like stuff that was going on in that like production Discord about like our TMP servers and like just like the creating of like the drafting overlay that like Zen uses now, is there's just so much there
It was a
where it
renaissance.
yeah, there was so much being like created, but it just has to be spread around. Otherwise, it's like it's too much for like one person, or even like I would say even like three people to shoulder.
Yeah.
Um,
It,
there
it,
have to
it
be like
requires a whole
at
team.
least five, yeah, plus involved, um, and I mean the hope is to get there. You know, maybe by like season 50. Who knows?
But
Maybe season 100. I mean,
Yeah.
it's about the process, you know.
don't worry, Yeah, Gambit will still be a second place hero.
Oh, he'll still be like fluctuating between Archon 3 and 5.
No, that's kind of some of my story, and I realized that I never really talked a whole lot about it to people and like why that ended up falling apart. It's something that I still really appreciate, and I want to put some content out there in the future that like teaches some of the stuff that I was doing with those servers and like why it's important. One of the things, and I know we like talked about money a while ago, but I would love to have for the league is actually a cloud control room where instead of needing someone to run those servers, we could have like a cloud instance where we can have like an ingest server in the cloud that we use as relay for observers and a parsec instance on that to share it out to casters. So if we want to do a dedicated observer, then have to have it be on any one person's computer. You can just into it. But that's still a lot of infrastructure. It's still a lot of money, and it's the kind of thing that like it's simpler in a way than teaching everyone and expecting someone to have not only the know-how but the infrastructure and like the networking stuff at home. But it's also like how much of a return, how worth it.
And the other thing about doing expansion like that is you have to also get admins behind that to get that kind of expansion on a production level. Like
Yeah.
it takes a fair amount of convincing to try and get them to spend that kind of money, and it would also mean perhaps even increasing the buy-in to the league just to be able to try and expand like that. And that's definitely not something teams want right now. I think teams are in a good spot right now
I mean,
where it's
I think you can do it independent from the league,
Mhm.
for sure, and not really what I suggested, like half jokingly earlier, but like I don't think you really need to approach the admin team for that kind of thing.
I mean, I could
Um,
just spool up an instance right now, but it's a matter of like, is it worth it for me to
yeah,
create a container that I host on AWS that has an OBS instance and a RTMP server and a Parsec instance on there that we can spin up at any point in time? And like, is it worth it to administer that?
just start a GoFundMe for some server and rack. Just do it.
the AD2L GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Or an OnlyFans, just put it out there.
Oh,
Too.
we'll get Seth for
Just
that.
only Dota content. Only Dota content. Mostly Wind Ranger, I think, but
God.
I thought that was Dota 2 smut.
Oh, Lord.
All right, I'm starting to run out of juice a little bit. Any of you guys got some more things you want to add, or anyone out in the audience got some questions for us?
Did we get everything from the?
The itinerary?
It's been 2 hours. I hope we
Yeah,
did.
I'm pretty sure we're on
Oh.
fuck it, more questions.
Oh, I have one that I guess we didn't really talk about, but
Shoot.
the one that came up in feedback discussion was kind of like hot. It was like a little contentious. Was bringing in outside higher level casters, tier 1, tier 2 for grand finals.
Okay.
No.
I'll open that up to you all before I add my own.
All right. I definitely have stuff I want to say about this. I'm open to letting Shap or Chaos take the point on this, though. If you have any thoughts.
go
I
ahead.
thought
Oh.
I thought the discussion that was put out there was very, very helpful and eye opening, especially what you put out staged about how I want to say like you had the professional casters and how they not that they wouldn't treat it seriously, but how it if once they realized what they were casting and there's like legend gameplay, how
Yeah.
much it detracted from what was being happening. I especially remember that Ziori cast, which
Oh,
had a lot to be deserved, if I'm being honest. But as far as like tier 2 casters, that's also just like opportunity cost for them.
Right.
Because anytime you're spending 4 hours and to cast playoff matches, that's 4 hours that you could be casting DPC or something else. I don't know. You could be casting China, and there is just actually money there.
Well, I can speak to this a little bit because at least, a year ago when I was Twitter and talking to all these guys on the regular. Actually had pretty decent conversations with Avo Plus and with not Coddle guy, Autumn, guy who goes by Priestess, involved with EPOLs.
Oh, yeah, that.
Yeah. But I've had a decent amount of conversations with a lot of these people who are like tier 2 talents and everything. So I can talk about this a little. But going back to what Chaos was talking about with the Zyori cast, because I think that's a good place to start. I am not a Zyori fan. I'm gonna be just completely upfront about that. I am not a Zyori fan. I have a lot of personal issues with it, and I think that I'm kind of glad that Zyori's gone from the Dota scene for more than just the allegations and everything that happened a couple years ago. But even ignoring that and putting my bias aside, I do think that that cast in particular with Arno and Zyori did leave a lot to be desired. And I'm also aware that the Pot of Greed guys, that's like the highlight of their fucking Dota. They love it. Like, everything about that. B-Jack Honeydew still goes by, Zyori had called him. I think it was like, Bumblebee
Raw
Bitch.
sauce.
Bumblebee Bitch or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, so my opinion on this isn't actually all that important. I know that like a lot of people would love it if they got flamed by Slacks or by Jenkins or something like that. So I can't like say, hey, this is a bad idea and everyone's gonna. But I can say that, you know, I've worked with Slacks before. I've worked with Jenkins and Cap before. And Slacks in particular, I've done like 2 or 3 different gigs with. And from a caster's perspective, I don't have like a lot of faith that the casters that we have around, because usually like in MD2L, in C-Dub and stuff like that, when you bring in one of these celebrity casters, you have them go alongside one of your guys. So like I know Math did one with Slacks, I think he did one with OD Pixel, as Math did one with OD Pixel, was kind of cracked. But working with Slacks in particular, I would be really hesitant to have one of our casters work alongside of Slacks. And that's because of like one really specific thing that I made this mistake. Finnick made this mistake. Everybody that I've worked with who's casted alongside of Slacks has made this mistake. And it is something like I've warned people about. And it's actually like almost offensive. And that's like, okay, Slacks is a character, right? Like, you guys, you watch his videos, and okay, like, he puts on a character for that. Different from his pubs, different from his personal life, right?
Yeah.
Everybody who casts with Slacks treats him like his character. And that's fine, except for the fact that they treat him like they're in on the joke. So, like, the whole Wind Ranger thing of, like, you know, Slacks hates Wind Ranger, and Slacks only plays techies. They act like they're in on that joke. And, like, that's something that they're allowed to crack the joke about. But the problem is that, like, Slacks doesn't really give you the go-ahead on that. And I'm pretty sure that the guy's, like, actually really, really sensitive in his day-to-day life. So, when you kind of slip in on that and, like, crack the joke and make the cast be about Slacks' character instead of the game, it just kind of makes the entire thing really awkward and like a bad experience for everybody, because Slacks
really
tries to
vapid.
he like tries to just brush it off and everything, but like you can tell that like immediately he's deflated. And everybody makes this mistake. And I'm really like kind of afraid with like a lot of the A-tier casters and everything when people get starstruck, and especially Slacks, that you're gonna kind of run into that, like, treating them as the character, as opposed to playing it like a professional, like a consummate professional. And dealing with Cap in particular, you know, I talked about the Cap Jenkins thing for the charity event. And Cap Jenkins, like, they're professionals, they're really good at what they do, but the cast was kind of boring because neither of them knew the players. They didn't have that personal background to back it up on. So unless you've got the right personalities running alongside of them who can like really create that personal touch and fill them in like you're being a social analyst, you're actually losing a lot of value bringing these guys in because they're used to such a different environment. And it sucks. And I think that based on my personal experiences, if you get a tier 2 guy who's used to being on the outside and used to having to do the research and used to having to, like, not know what they're talking about, you don't get the star power of being flamed by Slacks or Zyori. But you do get, like, kind of a higher quality because they're not used to being stuck in this, like, yeah, oh, hey, we know everybody. We're doing all of this based on information we've had in the back of our heads for 5 years.
Mhm.
But that's just my perspective, and that's not the same thing that everyone's going to want because some people don't care about, like, this being, like, a genuine friendly kind of thing. They just want to get hated on by the meme of the day, you know?
And I'll say I would love to cast aside Slacks or Jenkins or anyone in this pro scene just as someone who watches them and envies sort of the position they're in. I totally respect them. But going back to sort of what I was talking about earlier, it is a little bit about finding that duo. You can't just bring in one of those personalities and just bring it in with some rando. It's you got to do a little bit of research and find out who's going to be compatible with who, and that's sort of that is sort of a reason that it won't quite work right away, especially with those higher tier names, is because everybody already knows them, and so they have a on-screen persona that might not match with their regular personalities, and so it's hard to tell whether those two personalities will match on stream.
And that's why
And
you got Slacks and Licky, because they're already best friends.
right, like same thing with Syndrin and Sunsfan. Like you get the feeling when they're casting that those two would absolutely just shoot this shit and just like go out to a bar just like on a weekend.
Yeah. You feel like there's not characters that are involved there, like it's all authentic. But at
Mhm.
the same time, there's definitely some people that truly are, like, playing some form of character. It's not saying, like, they're not being authentic. It's just that, you know, this is a professionalism thing. This is them morphing into caster form instead of person form. And I don't know, like, maybe people don't care about that. Maybe people, like, aren't too worried about causing offense or, like, kind of weird authenticity stuff, or just someone not really having an idea and kind of floundering around on that. Maybe it's just, because I get to have my game cast by Cap. Like, that's just, all right, my life is done. I can put this on my resume. I can tell my boss about it. Hey, check this out, dude. Look at this. Do you know who this guy is? It's Capitalist. You don't know who that is? You want me to shut up and go back to my desk? I don't care, man. I got cast by Cap.
Did you pay extra to get him to throw water on you?
That's just my take on it, though. Go ahead, Licky, though. You said you had stuff you wanted to talk about with this.
Yeah, I was actually gonna go and find whatever I said in feedback discussion, but I got distracted by listening to you guys.
Sorry.
But no.
Sometimes you just get lost in a good conversation.
Yeah, just lost in the sauce. I think my main point though is like just being like careful about it and trying to figure out what exactly we want out of it and like what we want in our grand finals casts. Because if our point is like views and attend, and I think like the plus side of it is like you get the views and obviously like whatever the audience that particular caster has, whatever abilities they bring to the table, and then also like the prestige of being casted by that person, and that's a lot for the players but also for the league as a whole. And then there's also like the other side we've talked about where casters in the league have like familiarity, and they can provide like their specific kind of viewpoint that just like cannot exist outside of the league, and theoretically more like care when it comes to the cast in terms of like specific knowledge. And it's kind of just being like careful about it and like making sure we don't have like situations that like happen in the past. And that means I think we have to get like, if we were to do it, we'd have to get like very specific casters and like have like a conversation with them beforehand rather than just being like, here's $150, cast my game, just like chucking money at him.
Right.
I don't think is the play. Because like someone brought up like Jenkins in the feedback discussion, and it was like have him cast Explorer, and I was immediately like, no, 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 let's not do that because
That's so
I've
disrespectful.
seen I've seen Jenkins like stuff that he does with like heralds and stuff, and it's almost always just like his like utter like disbelief, slack jawed awe at the fact that this herald has 6 GG branches at 50 minutes into the game, and it's less about like actually like providing analysis and like thinking about like their thought process without like downgrading them. As someone who's like done casts for the Crusader Grand Finals like 3 times in a row, like everything, the first thing I tell the people that I like bring on is like never ever talk about like the MMR aspect of it. Like that's just like you're just like talking down in that sense, and I feel like that's so easy when it comes to like someone coming from the outside who doesn't like know what's happening here. They can be like, "Oh, these are just like low MMR players, right?" So like they'll be like, "Oh, a meta pick would be this, but these players aren't as in tune with the meta." And it's like, yes, that's correct. That's like objectively
Mhm.
a correct statement, but like that's not really what like anyone is here to see. Because then you get into this like I wouldn't call it like flame cast, but like condescending cast. Like no one wants like a caster that like thinks slash like knows they're better than the players and is like talking down. Like obviously analysis you can like provide corrections and things like that, but you don't want someone being like, oh yeah, this is like a literal hero, like they're garbage. Like no, what? Get out of here. Like
Mhm.
that isn't how it is. Like I don't know. I feel like I
Yeah.
talked about it in feedback discussion, but like OD Pixel and like the Valkyries tournament, like we had people like Jamie playing in that tournament. So it's not just like literal like only immortals. There's like a wide variety of MMR, but that was never really like in question. It was almost like everyone, all the players were like treated as equals in terms of like the cast. It wasn't like someone made a mistake. Oh, they're just like a dumb like hero. They don't know how to press their buttons. It was like, oh, they got like outplayed and stuff like that, and it builds this like narrative into the game and like just making sure that if we choose to bring someone in, they're honoring all these things that we like love about our league and like want to highlight and things like that. Um, and
There's a
just like making sure that that's important that we're elevating our games rather than bringing them down with our casts is kind of just like the important part.
there's a certain level of tact, that, especially when you're dealing with low level games, in terms of like even just the word that you describe it, because like
Yeah,
it is really hard to not acknowledge that people aren't playing Dota, and I had to do that a lot in
It's really hard.
the Rocket League that I was casting for a while. One of the things that like I learned to say is talking about things as being developmental or like asynchronous development. So like, or not asymmetric, or asynchronous, asymmetrical. So like you'll learn to do certain things really well before you learn to do the rest of it. And taking it from that perspective is like less condescending to people, but it's also really hard to take that perspective if you're not used to dealing with that kind of caliber. But no, I think that's a really good call out, Licky, and like I guess that kind of comes down to what are we looking for kind of thing. Getting the extra eyes in from their audience, like poaching almost. Is just getting a different experience for the players? Is that our who we're casting for, or is it to kind of elevate the experience in a way? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't think that any of us do.
definitely not.
I have something of a really stupid idea,
Yeah.
but I think that one of the ways that this could maybe work is instead of having them join one of our casts, we just join them and have them naturally cast one of the games, just like as if they were just somebody trying to cast an AD2L game, which obviously like it's very not going to happen. Like they're not just going to pull up and say, I want to cast this AD2L game.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, the only way to really make something like that work is to make it feel more natural in that way where it is just something that they want to do, and like it's not poaching any viewers from them because they're the ones broadcasting it. And so it's more about like them having a good time with it, and everybody trying to have a good time with it than
Right.
just trying to have simply just an experience of having someone from a high MMR cast you. Because I can say, as someone who's been on the receiving end of a high MMR player, just looking at one of your games and being like, wow, I can't believe this is the kind of shit you play in. It's an offhand comment once is funny, but once it gets repeated, it becomes
Yeah.
just not funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like it's just like there's nothing you can do about it at the time. It's like, hey man, I'm just trying to play the best Dota I can, and then it's just nothing you can really do about it.
Wait a second. That's what you're. Oh man, that's what I've been doing wrong the whole time. I never try and play the best Dota I can. Jeez, I gotta start doing that.
That's crazy.
He doesn't even have his monitor on half the time.
Down here.
The
He's
other
just
thing I would
guessing
do
based off of sounds.
is
God.
you could either just try and play the best Dota you can, or you could just break your items and run down mid. I've seen that work too.
True.
That was in a Jenkins Herald replay. Okay.
I think you're.
That was in
I
a
think
game.
you're.
In one of the college games I cast, my college was playing Purdue, and they had an alchemist who broke his items and ran down mid, and 40 minutes later they won the game.
Based.
Like
Dota in a
this is a
nutshell.
straight up just college match. Like this is NAC Star League. Like it was crazy because like it was just this team who was just like they had someone who tilted for like 20 minutes of the game, and then they just won it. That was crazy. That was probably my favorite experience casting, was just watching a team be so good that they could literally have someone tilt and still win. It was just I hadn't seen anything like it before.
All right, guys. I think we've really run this into the ground and like kind of talked about everything that we can. I want to thank you guys so much for coming out and spending this night with me. I know the Friday night you don't have anything better to do, but
Of course not.
no, honestly, like even just having these kind of conversations and like probably gonna do this again, but getting the chance to talk about what it is that we do and like the good, the bad, the ugly, and some of the problems that people bring up. Um, I think it's really cool, and I think you guys provided a lot. I gotta hand it to you. I gotta thank you for spending time with me. With that being said, unless anybody's got some parting thoughts, I think we're gonna go ahead and call it for the night.
All I gotta say is thanks, Stage, for putting this together. It was a blast.
Yeah, it's just awesome. I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of conversation happening in like feedback discussion, and it's nice to have a place to condense and like discuss it in a more like organized and proper format where we can like flesh out like ideas and potential thoughts for the future.
It's almost like group therapy for casters.
I knew I was in the
Oh,
wrong
man.
occupation.
Therapist, that's what I was going for.
If only it paid as much as software developer.
Mm.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Everyone out there, if you're watching this on Twitch, YouTube, whatever, appreciate it. If for some reason you're seeing this and you've made it this far and you're not from AD2L, first off, what's wrong with you? Is this ASMR or something? And secondly, you should totally check out AD2L. It's a amateur Dota community and probably one of the best leagues I've ever seen. It's where I met all of these bozos. And yeah, it's on playon.gg, so check that out. That's about all I got. Again, I'm staged. Here with me is Chaos, Shap, and LickyTheCow. And until next time, let's play some Dota.
Have a good night.